What's up, everybody? Welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer alongside Mike Gallagher. We have 6 games. It's a rarity in the NBA these days. It feels like every day has been either like 3 or 10 plus. So a 6-game slate, plenty of injury questions to deal with. Much more like an 11-game slate than a 3-game slate in terms of injury stuff to deal with today. A lot of teams dealing with back-to-backs and like congested parts of their schedule. Mike, how are you doing? You look a little frazzled from this injury report.
Yeah, a little bit. Yeah, I got bedhead. Haven't them off my desk this morning, so yeah, doing good. But let's get into it.
All right, let's start off with the Raptors. They just kind of dropped the bombshell on us in the last half hour that OG Anunoby is out and supposedly going to be out for a while with the hip issue. Precious Achiuwa is doubtful tonight, and we know with Toronto, they will play their main guys heavy minutes. So you try to project the Toronto rotation in a game where they're 9.5-point underdogs on the road against Utah, it can get messy. So how do we think this stuff impacts things? They do have Siakam back, even without Anunoby, so they're not like at their thinnest point, but no Anunoby, no Achiuwa does make things challenging. So what do you expect Toronto to do from a starting lineup perspective tonight?
Yeah, and you add to the fact that they're playing with Utah, and that makes you think they probably got to go big. It's been Scotty Barnes who's really been guarding the centers. We see him guard Time Lord, Nurk. They are not afraid to play Scotty Barnes big, but I mean, Gobert is kind of a different animal because he plays so tall when he's around the basket on really both ends. So I think they kind of have to go Khem Birch. Nick Nurse has mentioned that they would keep the door open on possibly starting him in certain spots. So, just because the lack of depth, I think if you want to fill minutes, you want to put him right out of the gate with him there. So I think he would start. You do have Chris Boucher as an option, not the greatest spot for him against Gobert. We know that Nurse doesn't really like him against kind of the bigger centers, more of like the bulkier ones, but I still think Boucher would be a tough spot here. He's only played 33 minutes at center all season, despite Precious being hurt. Birch was hurt earlier in the year. Still to be 33. It's a crazy low number for him as he's been primarily a backup 4-man. But yeah, maybe he kind of carves out more of a role. But I just think that they kind of like use Barnes wherever they need to fill him in. And once they got Siakam back, they're like, okay, where's our weak spot? It's center. Let's play him there. So now I think they're going to be like, okay, where's our weak spot now? It's without OG. Let's put Scotty Barnes there. You use the old, boat with gunshot holes. Like that's where they're plugging Scotty Barnes. So I think that's kind of a thing. So like I don't think Boucher's in the greatest of spots. Of course, it's Boucher, so like he's going to be worth a look. A as a pickup, and B is someone that you want to start tonight just because we saw what happened with Philly. They played him almost as a straight 4 though. So I think maybe they do go bigger in that route, but having Siakam caps Boucher a little bit.
The potential candidates to start here, you would agree, are Khem Birch, Svi Mikhailuk, and Chris Boucher. Those are probably the 3 guys that could potentially start.
Yeah, I think so. And they honestly might even start Barnes and put him on Gobert and just have.
Well, the thing we have to remember here is with Gobert, while he is a big, other teams like the Clippers tried to go small against him in the playoffs. We saw Philadelphia last time out. Like we thought that was a spot for Drummond to play a lot of minutes. We did not get a lot of Drummond minutes.
No.
As the sirens swirl past me here. So I'm very interested to see who they start. It's the last game on the slate. So it's a tough one to prep for. And we've seen when they have been shorthanded, they've allowed Svi to get up into the upper 30s in some games before when they've been really shorthanded. And if they chose to start him and play really small, I think it could be a spot where he gets pretty high on the minutes side too. You would also mention that Nick Nurse had talked about wanting to get Malachi Flynn some minutes. This certainly opens up the door and the opportunity for that to happen. I don't expect that he'd play substantial minutes, but it is another body in the rotation that we're now projecting minutes for, given Nurse's comments, given how shorthanded they are. The thing that I will say about this is just generally, all of the Toronto projections are going to be pretty fragile tonight. On the main guys, Van Vliet, Barnes, Siakam, Gary Trent, I think their minutes are really stable on the high end, but this is a 10-point spread. So there's a chance that we get these guys more like 31, 32 instead of 38, 39. just because the game situation and the outcome here. So I think Toronto is going to be a really fragile situation to project. It's going to be one that you're going to have to be paying attention to all night long, because really they don't have good options here. Like Khem Birch is their biggest guy. He's not a big center. He's very undersized for a center. Boucher is very undersized from a width perspective for most centers, but has the length. But Nurse hates playing him at center. So I really don't know. We have kind of a lean in the direction of Birch starting here, but it like any combination of one of those three guys, Mikhailuk, Birch, or Boucher, would not surprise me tonight. Yeah. If they got into like starting like Banton or Flynn or something like that, that would surprise me.
Yeah, they did say, so back to this fee thing, when he got cut down, they said they wanted to play Banton more playing time. So, keep your eyes open for news if, we get a hint from Nurse, because that hint was pretty valuable. Came a little late, but, he kind of did tip his rotation a little bit.
Yeah.
I guess if you want to, I think we kind of covered it.
All right, let's move over to another team that is, trying to fill those cartoon boat holes. Cleveland now. Once again, no Lauri Markkanen, no Jared Allen. Same situation we saw last night, where last night the way that they responded was play Garland 40, play Okoro 39, play Dean Wade 37. Because again, we've talked about this. They don't have depth. They really just don't have a roster that's filled with NBA players. And so they've decided to counter by just like playing our best guys as much as we can. They lost by close to double digits against Brooklyn. Now they get Golden State on the second night of a back-to-back. They're at home. So it's a situation where the spread is under 10, but you have to have a little bit of a level of concern of whether they can keep this game competitive, and not only whether they can keep the game competitive, but just in terms of on a back-to-back, will they say, okay, yeah, Garland 40, we're going with Garland 40 again? Or will they say, like, we can't play Darius Garland 40 every night. We need to like plan for him to play like 35, 36. And so there's a lot of question marks around Cleveland. Again, there's going to be value that's opened up because they don't have a lot of players available, but it's a bad matchup. There's a lot of risk on these things. And so it's going to be a fragile projection set once again. But you can see last night, like Ed Davis, 24 minutes, Darius Garland, 40, Okoro, 39, Wade, like 37.5, gets rounded up to 38 in those spots. They just don't have guys that they can trust. And you look at the bench in terms of guys that they trust Kevin Love, but he's on the back-to-back and he was on a minutes limit last night. And they trust Jetty, but Jetty only played 19 last night. Fall, Valentine, Windler, they don't trust. And so they just are not deep. So do you think they run these super, super tight rotations again? Do you think like these guys are really safe for mid to upper 30s in terms of Garland and Okoro and Wade?
I kind of think they have to be, right? I mean, they've got nobody left. They don't want to play Dylan Windler big minutes. They don't want to play Valentine big minutes. After the game, Bickerstaff said that Ed Davis got his number called for that spot. And like, you're not going to play Ed Davis in non-Looney minutes, right? So maybe he starts again on a much tighter leash. Yeah. I would expect Jetty has to play more today. I was really disappointed that he only got 19 minutes last night. I would expect his minutes to come up just because they have to play a more switchy defense. Jetty's really comfortable with that. Love, we don't know what's up with his minutes after the game. Bickerstaff, I thought he said rest, but he said rust when he was describing Kevin Love's performance yesterday. So, probably similar amount of playing time just because they kind of have to. He is playing back-to-backs. He played on, I think, the 30th of October. I played in a back-to-back set just before he went down. So, yeah, I think he plays kind of similar, but just fewer Davis minutes for more small stuff. I think Dean Wade is going to play a pretty good amount again.
Yeah, I think Dean Wade's minutes are really secure because I think, I don't want to say in any situation, but like he's not a guy that they're going to try to like protect on the blowout side of things. They don't they know they're getting these reinforcements back eventually. So they'll let him go. Okoro and Garland, I'm like modestly concerned about just because I do think if the game gets out of hand, there would be really no reason to let those guys. Rubio, I think, would be the guy that would be cut first in terms of if it's like a blowout situation. But we've got his minutes a little bit lower anyway compared to those guys. And then I think in terms of guys who could see more playing time tonight, I agree that Jetty is the guy that would seem to have the biggest kind of potential increase in minutes tonight. But a really tough matchup for Cleveland. Obviously, on a 6-game slate, you're going to have to look to these spots for value. But I would expect the smaller ball lineups from Golden State to allow for more Jetty tonight, a little bit less Ed Davis and Taco Fall.
Yep.
Good. All right, let's go to the Clippers, because they're another team that has like a really deep injury report in terms of number of names on it, and one that I think is impactful tonight on the matchups. So they're without Marcus Morris, Nicholas Batum, Serge
Doubtful, just to make
Ibaka.
that clear. He's doubtful, but yeah, he's doubtful, Batum, but we're not expecting him to play.
Yeah. So yeah, assuming the Clippers injury report, which is always a challenge,
right.
But Morris, Batum, Winslow, Ibaka, Terrence Mann is questionable, so we're projecting him in currently. But this is a team that lost a lot of front court depth, and they're playing a Memphis team that generally likes to play somebody who is like a truer center, whether it's Steven Adams, whether it's Jaren Jackson, Brandon Clark, Xavier Tillman, like generally like a truer center type body, not really a small ball type guy. You could make the argument that Clark is kind of that, but not really. And so this is a spot where I think when you take away all the power forward options, because basically now we're looking at like Amir Coffey playing power forward or Paul George playing power forward, you get away from the Clippers combinations where they can play their small ball stuff. So I think you're going to see 48 minutes from Zubats and Hartenstein tonight, which you usually don't see from the Clippers. Usually it ranges between like 40 to 44, sometimes like 36 in the games that they go really, really small. So I think that's an increased opportunity for both Zubats and Hartenstein that should be fairly safe. Obviously, both players have foul risk issues. Both players, like there's ways that it can go wrong. But I think if they stay out of foul trouble, they stay out of injuries, I think we're getting 48 true center minutes tonight from the Clippers.
Yeah, I think that has to be the case just because A, the matchup, and B, just they're out of other bodies. But yeah, the Batum thing is interesting. We found out the other night, the broadcast says, during the game, they found out that Batum was on a minutes cap because of his Achilles issue. And then after the game, Ty Lue said that Batum told him that, hey, just keep me out. I'll let these young guys go. So we saw some Brandon Boston, Amir Coffey, those guys fill in. And yeah, like we were saying, I mean, Lue has also called Coffey a 2 to 4, which, Terrence Mann is more of a 2 to 3, sometimes even a 1. So even if Mann plays, and we're projecting him in, I kind of don't think he plays just because that ankle injury didn't look great, but like we don't have any evidence to put him out besides what we've already seen a few days ago. So who knows what's changed? Sometimes these guys could bounce back pretty quick. But yeah, I think Coffey's minutes are pretty safe just because I think that they don't have anybody else. I don't think they would dare put Paul George at the 4 spot and put him on Jaren Jackson. They might, and then go with Kennard or maybe even Boston. Like they really like this kid. But yeah, they're real thin. So the big takeaway for sure is Zoo and Hartenstein are going to get pretty good amount of playing time tonight on top of their wings. They really
that is an 8:00 Eastern game tonight. Lock is at 7:30 Eastern tonight. So I think we'll get the Terrence Mann injury before lock, but with the Clippers, you never know. And obviously, and hopefully we'll get a starting lineup as well. Our guess right now, I think it's somewhere between Terrence Mann and Amir Coffey as the starter in this situation. Mm-hmm. I agree with you that I think they'd prefer to try to keep Paul George off of Jaren Jackson Jr. So you could see a situation where like Amir Coffey starts, but then when Memphis does their rotations where they stagger Jaren Jackson and Steven Adams, Coffey's minutes come down because then they can slide Paul George to the 4 in those lineup combinations. I think you might see stuff like that. But this is going to be a situation to monitor in terms of Mann's availability and also in terms of who the starters look like, because I think there will be some value here. And unlike the Cleveland situation or the Toronto situation where those teams are decent sized underdogs and have implied totals that are pretty low, the Clippers have 111 implied total. It's a good game environment to potentially target here. So I think it's a spot where you want to be excited about hunting for value. Whereas the Cleveland spot, the Toronto spot, it feels like you might be like scrounging to get your guys to value. I think the Clippers side has a little bit more upside to it. And that will also be for guys like Luke Kennard that we've seen, Eric Bledsoe, those guys who we've seen, their minutes be able to rise and increase in the absence of Terrence Mann at different points this season. Mm-hmm. All right, let's talk about the Heat. They played last night. They played without Kyle Lowry, without Bam Adebayo. They did release an injury report or I should say they did release an update with Tyler Hero. Yeah, they did release an injury report. Bam is probable. Kyle Lowry's not on the injury report. And then the new addition was Tyler Hero and Caleb Barton are both listed as questionable. And obviously Tyler Hero is a big deal in terms of projecting Miami, just because anytime you get rid of Bam, Lowry, Hero, or Butler, it condenses the opportunities on the other three guys, essentially. So what do you think about this Tyler Hero injury? And how do you think it would impact things if he was unable to go tonight?
Yeah, new injury, right? He was listed with a back. That was what he was with earlier when he was getting questionable tags. Comes out with a wrist bruise. So I would assume that was last night. I don't really know when it happened, but I think it makes sense. Spoelstra had a really big quote saying that, they're expecting rest kind of for now. So, maybe they sit him out. I think he kind of deserves it, right? He's been playing a ton. Dedmon has that groin thing. Honestly, I would perceive that Dedmon thing as a questionable to me, just because the way that it's being framed and being called a groin strain. I think he's got a pretty decent chance to sit out tonight, given he gave him good minutes yesterday. Caleb's injury, who doesn't really affect us, but Bam's coming back. That's great. Minor knee thing. I think it was just more of a rest thing for him. Lowry wasn't on the injury report, and then all of a sudden gets ruled out for rest, which, maybe they changed their mind. Like, okay, we can rest in the spot. But yeah, so without Hero, they've got Max Strus, who plays really well, Duncan Robinson. They've got plenty of guys that could fill playing time. Without Caleb Martin, if he doesn't go, I guess the impact would be Max Strus's minutes should be pretty safe. I think he could be someone to possibly look at, in somewhat of a not the tiniest of slates, but I think he'd be a guy that picks up more playing time. He's been awesome. Kind of lately, he's been hitting shots. He defends. He does a lot of things that they would want. It's kind of a bench wing, so he'd be someone to maybe look at more so than like Casey Okpala. Gabe Vincent also would really benefit with all those backup point guard minutes. So we saw him get a lot of overlap with Hero too. So he would be a guy that would step up as well.
One of the things that's been interesting about Gabe Vincent is his rates have been wildly different depending on kind of what the lineup combinations that he's playing in. And I think in this scenario, if Tyler Hero were to miss, Gabe Vincent would actually play in some lineup combinations that are pretty favorable for his rates to bounce back. So sometimes you see with Gabe Vincent, he starts in these games where he just fills in for Lowry and he's kind of a starter name only. And then he just goes and stands in the corner, doesn't really initiate any offense or anything like that. Then you see him start in some of these games where they're decimated and they have nobody available. And he runs a ton of offense and they run a lot of stuff through him. And so his rates are really tough to project given whatever the situation is. Tonight, I actually think it would be a situation that would be pretty favorable if he was just kind of replacing Tyler Hero as the lead ball dog in that second unit, where basically they run a lot of stuff for Max Strus off of screens. They would stagger in some of the starters into that, obviously, but I think Vincent would have a higher chance at that assist rate being what it's been when we've seen him play with kind of the decimated teams. And so for a really cheap salary relief play, I think he'd be in play. The one thing that was really surprising to me last night was the only 26 minutes from Duncan Robinson. He's been a guy that's been consistently in kind of the low to mid 30s. We had an over on his 3-pointers made prop, so certainly missing some playing time there was disappointing from that perspective. But Strus's availability, if he gets hot, they basically run all the same stuff for Duncan, for Strus that they run for Duncan. And so, those two guys are somewhat interchangeable, and they probably don't share the court a ton, just because of the way Miami's offense is run, where you have one guy doing those things and then they want kind of secondary ball handlers in those other spots. So just kind of thinking through these things, I think the guys who would benefit most if Tyler Hero were out, certainly the main guys like Jimmy Butler, Bam, and Kyle Lowry all benefit because they're the lead dogs and they're going to play in more lineup combinations with just one of the other instead of two other lead dogs, right? Because they're going to stagger these guys a little bit. And then I think Gabe Vincent and Max Strus would also benefit as well as potential cheap plays. Their projections probably won't be great and will be a little bit more volatile in terms of trying to figure out where to go. But I do think this is a spot, it's also not a great spot generally. Washington's a pretty good defensive team. They're on the second night of back-to-back, especially for Strus and Duncan. Washington really takes away the 3-point line. So I think, Vincent would be the cheap guy I'd have my eye on most. But it wouldn't be a spot where I'd be I don't think where we'd be projecting him as a clear value play.
Yeah, I agree. The matchup definitely a factor for Strus and Duncan.
Yeah. All right. In terms of other injury situations that we're monitoring on this slate, we talked about Terrence Mann. Let's talk about Denver with Will Barton. We've got the Will Barton hokey pokey going on the last 3 days. He's gone from questionable to doubtful, back to questionable. with an upgrade today. So what do you think on Will Barton? We had him projected out. I haven't gotten a chance to go back and check whether we should be projecting him in at this point. But what are your thoughts on Will Barton's ability to return tonight? They're playing a devastated, from an injury perspective, Philadelphia team that's still without Embiid, Danny Green, Tybal, so on and so forth.
Yeah, so just the background on that, he was warming up over the weekend, and like he went to the ground in pain. It was scary. They thought he was going to play. All of a sudden, we had a prop on him that night, and hasn't been out. Good sign. Again, like say this all the time, back injuries. I don't know. He could be feeling great today or bad tomorrow, whatever the case. So total guess. I think we got to project him in, just given that the upgrades in there, and maybe he has a little bit of a cap on him. This guy's had a lot of injury history. He's mostly leg stuff. But, we'll keep an eye on that. I would expect his minutes to be not full, given the nature of the injury. So Bones Highland hurt his ankle. He's probable. Looks like he's good to go. Malone didn't express any concern after their last game and their post-game presser. You still got Austin Rivers, who was filling in. He would probably go away more than anybody else if Barton does, in fact, start. But they still have Dozier, still filling in for Michael Porter Jr., who's not close, which has been pretty crazy for them. But, obviously, Jokic could have a lot of offense funneled through him if Barton's out too.
Yeah, and I think given Will Barton's injury history in this matchup, the Bulls are on tap. I believe they play the Bulls tomorrow, right? Is this
they're back-to-back? Yep.
Yeah, so I kind of think it makes sense for them to be pretty conservative with Will Barton. They've had a hard time keeping him healthy the last few years. They're obviously ravaged right now. And I feel like they can probably take care of the Sixers without him. And then if he's, give the back another day, see how things feel tomorrow. That's my lean on how they'll approach things. But obviously it's a big change if he is there. Like Will Barton is another lead potential dog in terms of usage and would compete for usage with Nikola Jokic and would hurt his rates a little bit there, would hurt Aaron Gordon. From a playing time perspective, would obviously hurt Austin Rivers and Facundo Campazzo the most. You also mentioned that they've been concerned about Monty Morris as well, who's not on the injury report, but you caught a note from Mike Malone that they're trying to manage Monty Morris as well, right?
Yeah, Monty Morris. Don't forget, back in the offseason, he took off 8 to 10 weeks, no surgery because he's had issue with his knee for years, his left knee, and I think on the 9th, about a week ago, week and change. He was listed as probable with this knee injury. Ever since, his minutes have been kind of ticked down. Isn't a back-to-back, so definitely concerned about Monty Morris not getting the high upside stuff, which is also good news for Bones Highland, who's played some one at the time, mostly a wing, but we've seen him play at the one, even close there briefly in certain spots. So Bones, coming off that ankle injury, could be looking at more playing time, just given the back-to-back factor on Monty.
Yeah. So I think Denver's another team you're going to have to monitor tonight. But really, the way that I note things for Denver is I think, Jokic is obviously super expensive, but he's going to carry a really big offensive workload unless Will Barton plays. And even if Will Barton plays, he'll still carry a really big workload. It's just it gets better if Will Barton's out. But I think there's more reason to think that they're conservative on Barton. The one thing that I note is just generally midday upgrades are usually a good sign. And so going from doubtful to questionable is the one thing that has me hesitant here on keeping Barton out as our primary assumption. But I think, front end of a back-to-back, tougher opponent on the next slate, just given who Philadelphia is missing tonight, I feel like they'd be more likely to be conservative on Barton, but it is something to monitor there. In terms of other injury news, we got right before coming onto the show, we got Jakob Poeltl's going to be back for San Antonio. And I think that changes San Antonio substantially. I don't know if Poeltl will return to the heavy minutes he was playing right away. So I've baked in some risk that they bring him along a little bit slower. But obviously he was playing really, really huge upside minutes early in the season. It's been a while. It's been a few weeks since we've been without Poeltl. I think they've gone 2-5 in games without him after having a good start to the season. And his size is needed in this spot against Karl Anthony Towns. So that takes away Drew Eubanks. It takes away Thad Young. Remember, Thad Young was barely playing before with Poeltl because I think they want to get a look at Eubanks as a developmental prospect. I think Thad's played well enough that they'll probably give him 10 minutes, 10 to 15 minutes, something like that. but these guys aren't going to be relevant from a DFS perspective with Pirtle back. And it does impact, I think, the upside of Keldon as well, McDermott, some of these guys who have seen their minutes like pump up a little bit because they've had to play Thad and Eubanks all the center minutes. Now they have a way that they could play some Thad power forward minutes if they wanted to. And so I just think it hurts the ceiling of guys like Keldon and McDermott a little bit as well.
Yeah, they were playing Thad a power forward in the preseason. I believe they haven't done that yet.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, he's played pretty well. I mean, you want to give him minutes, you could definitely get away with it. And shout out to Tristan Thompson, man. He said the Spurs have 8 guys who play the same position. That was just the best quote ever. That's got a mile ahead of everybody for the quote of the season if you haven't listened to it yet. But yeah, I think he hit everything on the head. A little bit of downside for Keldon, more so McDermott. And obviously, Eubanks, you're cutting him right now, and you're probably cutting Thad too. But yeah, it does affect DeJounte maybe just slightly, with the rebounding, and they use Pirtle quite a bit on offense.
Yep.
So a little bit upside off him.
Yeah, I think in terms of them, like I think Thad and Eubanks are back down to like 10 to 13-minute projections, just totally irrelevant now. Other things that we want to pay attention to for this slate, we've got Steph Curry, who came up with a probable tag, did go through shoot around. So there were just some concerns there about whether he'd be available tonight, given the opponent, given the situation. But it sounds like Curry's going to be good to go.
Yep, he got the probable tag, went to shoot around, was called questionable originally. You're a little concerned. Did have a little fall the other night against the Nets. Obviously, it looked fine. So, yeah, he had that fall last year, in Houston, when he kind of fell backwards and missed the stand-up thing. And yeah, so he should be good to go. No Iguodala, though, so that kind of affects things. Iguodala really was a key second unit defensive piece. So maybe Kuminga could get a little bit more run. Kuminga's been really good, man.
Yeah.
So I want to see some more Jonathan Kuminga tonight.
This is one of those spots where if this game does get out of hand, because they don't have Iguodala, like somebody like Kuminga there's paths to him playing like 22, 23 minutes tonight. They're not where we'd project. We're projecting him for like 17, 18, something like that. But there are some paths without Iguodala. If the game gets out of hand, like there are some paths there to take some shots on. I'm probably not going to be super interested in the Golden State guys just generally tonight. Like, big spread, big price tags for some of their main guys. And then the back end of the rotation is really hard to figure out on each and every night. But you would think that if the game did get out of hand, Kuminga would be one of the guys who would benefit most. In terms of other returns to the floor tonight that are impacting things or other outs, we've got Spencer Dinwiddie out resting on the second night of a back-to-back. So you can expect, we expect Aaron Holiday will continue to start. He's been the one starting in the absence of Beal. Sometimes Neto gets the start in the absence of Dinwiddie, but Aaron Holiday has played really well. And from a defensive perspective, I think he's a better fit to kind of start here and let Beal like run the offense, and then Neto can run the second unit. We'd expect mid-20s minutes for both of those guys, so not super impactful from a DFS spot and a tough matchup against Miami, but Bradley Beal's upside certainly increases without Spencer Dinwiddie.
Yeah, they're going to be playing the Heat, and it's interesting. The Heat have 45% of their shots allowed are from three, so I think it kind of makes sense to start Holiday for the reasons you said too, but keep an eye on some of these three-point shooters. Like if I'm game planning against them, I want a lot of shooters out there, so it could be a Kuzma Chuck game. We'll talk more about that later. And it's just interesting that Denny Abdi is cutting into KCP just a little bit, so they could maybe find a path to playing him more, moving KCP up to cut down Neto and maybe Holiday a little bit. So I think those guys are a little bit more dicey than kind of you would think, given Spencer Dinwiddie's been soaking up some pretty big minutes. And just really quick too, it also affects Daniel Gafford because you don't have Dinwiddie as that roll man with Gafford, so I think it ups Montrezl Harrell's upside just a little bit with not having Dinwiddie.
Yeah, and then the last injury, just to note here, Rudy Gay is going to return, make his debut for the Utah Jazz tonight. I think he's just going to take Eric Pascal's minutes that he's been playing. I don't know if he'll take all of them right away or if it'll be like a split situation where they work Gay back from a conditioning standpoint. Rudy Gay is towards the tail end of his career. But just to note that him being back in general does potentially impact some of the ceiling of like Royce O'Neal, Bojan Bogdanovic, like just in certain situations that like Rudy gets it going, it could impact those guys because they could view like Rudy as a scoring threat and then slide Royce down to the small forward spot if Bojan doesn't have it going one night, or they can have Rudy, if they need more offense, be the power forward and Royce O'Neal's minutes come down. So like he's a little bit of a bigger threat to the main wings and forwards minutes than someone like Eric Pascal is.
Yeah, if you saw what happened to Keldon Johnson in spots last year, Rudy Gay could mess with some guys who look like they have secure minutes. So yeah, you're on it with that one.
All right, and I think that does it. I think we've covered all the different injury issues for today's 6-game slate. Hopefully you guys feel better prepared and ready to attack lineup block. Around lineup block, 1 or 2 hours before lineup block, we will go live at 5:30 Eastern behind the paywall on the premium show at Established Run. So if you've got that in-season DFS package, you can join us there. We'll give all of our DFS takes that goes along with this injury report analysis. If you are not a subscriber, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel here. Make sure we get those free clicks. You get the free video shows, and we keep enjoying this whole free thing together. Very free flowing, lots of love. You guys give us the clicks, we give you the content. It's a good relationship. But that'll do it for us. We'll be back again tomorrow, 2:00 Eastern. And I'm pretty sure, I need to confirm with Justin Fan, but I'm pretty sure we're going to be bringing back Justin Fan for the Friday injury report analysis show as well. So we will see you again tomorrow, 2:00 Eastern. In front of the paywall, behind the paywall later tonight at 5:30 Eastern. Best of luck, everybody out there.